The gift of knowledge, what is it and how can you tell that you have the gift of knowledge? So, there's a lot of people that do research, and I am going to sit here and say that not everybody that does research has the gift of knowledge. Does that mean that the person doing the research doesn't have, not like, no, they've gained their knowledge through the research. And so there's people that gain their knowledge through research and through study and through, schooling and things like that. Then there are people with the gift of knowledge that do research as well, but they typically, see things that others have missed. Um, and so, like, for example, a geologist, they do a study about, rocks and things like that, and then they might write a book and other things. the Then you have people with the gift of knowledge that might read that book and might study the same things that they've watched and easily pick up on the what the geologists are saying, but then being able to see what they have missed, um, you know, being able to just like go, oh, actually, you know, and, but then somebody with the gift of knowledge. So actually, let me back up and say, so giving a example of what um, a geologist, or any given science, person in the science field would have missed. And there's a theory um, that the Earth, that the continents were all one continent at one time, and that's an actually like a pretty accurate theory, because you can see where South America probably could have fit, somewhere, kind of, on, Africa, and you can see America, how that could have fit, and whatnot. So obviously, I'm not going to argue that there was one big continent. Obviously, there was one big continent, and that continent split. However, I have actually, by looking, and I've kind of said this before, um, by looking at Google Earth, you can see where the Earth split apart. However, I don't necessarily see, so I can see the, separation, but I never, could see, and I still can't see any evidence of anything else that would have happened. Um, so, but then just a little while back, I noticed something else. I noticed that when you look at Google Earth, you look at the North Atlantic Ocean and the South Atlantic Ocean, you can see the split. And that split, that curve, you know, it's interesting how each curve follows. So there's a curve up here. If I show you on here, so where am I? There's a curve somewhere right up here that follows this, right? And then you get down here, there's another curve that is you can see from the crack that would be at the bottom of the ocean. You can see another curve that follows the that follows Africa. You know how Africa is shaped. Out here, well, the crack actually. So it does. It's interesting how the crack actually follows, but then there's another line that also follows the the crack actually, and actually follows this shaped, how again South America has this, whatever you want to call it, that dip, or that but that line, that carved out right here follows, again, it follows the crack that is in the ocean. And but then, interesting enough, that crack also, you can follow it up to here. You can follow, so you can play around with your thoughts on that. But I noticed that each landmass where it's cut follows the exact path of the crack down through the middle of the North Atlantic and South Atlantic Ocean. Now, what happened with the flood? With the flood waters rose over the entire earth. And then sometime after the waters receded, and by the way, the waters from the flood are still here. I mean, it's still visible. It's called the ocean. So the flood waters are still here. There's, at one time, the North Atlantic Ocean and the South Atlantic Ocean were all land. It was land. Well, that land, through plate, and however you pronounce it, plate tectonics, that land sunk, and the 7 continents arose. So after the flood, you have earth that basically sunk underneath the ocean, and then you have the continents that were lifted up through plate tectonics. Or, I don't know exactly, because I'm not a scientist, I don't know exactly how that worked, but it's the common belief both by, evolution scientists and creationists, those who believe in the six-day creation, that the plate tectonics, lifted the continents, up. They both believe that plate tectonics kind of shaped the world that we see today. And however, they believe that the continents were that the South America, North America, and the Antarctica and Australia were all once part of this one, and they were, but they suggest that Australia was never where, so they say Australia broke off and kind of went down to where it is now. They also suggest that Antarctica was, you know, that it wasn't always where that what well is there, and this is all, and you can get mad at me, but all I'm saying is I see a possible mistake. That's all I'm saying. So go back to what I said. The people with the gift of knowledge, oftentimes they see things that other people miss. And that's all I'm saying, is that it's possible that all I'm seeing is something that they missed. So I've taken everything that they've said, I've looked at it, and yes, I can sit here and say that I see something that they miss. I don't see any evidence of, I see evidence of the split, but I don't see any evidence of the separation. Why? Because we know that beneath the Atlantic Ocean, was once land, that is now covered in water. So, but there was a split. How do you describe the split? Well, the answer is seriously actually in the Bible. But you see a split down through the middle. So if, let's just try to picture the globe without an ocean. Picture a globe, and I apologize that I don't have a presentation, that I don't have, better equipment and things like that, so I can give a better presentation. So you're just going to have to use your imagination. But use your imagination to picture a globe that does not yet have an ocean. Well, how do you get the North Atlantic Ocean and South Atlantic Ocean? Well, starting with a globe without an ocean, well, one, there would have had to be a split in the center of that land, it would have cracked, it would have split open, and water would have gushed out from that. And then obviously the 40 days and 40 nights of rain from the flood, obviously. But then how do you get 7 continents? Well, the land that split is still beneath the ocean. It's still there, so it's just beneath the ocean. So before the flood, you just have to picture a world without the ocean being there. You have to picture a world without the ocean there, and you have to picture that these 7 continents were somehow connected to the land that is now beneath the ocean. And this would have been before the 7 continents rose and, from plate tectonics and, like things like that. So, so now you have a picture of the 7 continents, connected to this giant landmass that's now underneath the Atlantic Ocean. And what happened was it split, but because of the continents arising, you get South America, you get North America, Africa. Because go back to what I said earlier about how it's interesting how the crack in that earth kind of matches how the continents are carved out. So the continents are carved because of the split, the earth splitting. And that part of the earth stayed down beneath the water, and the continents arose. Did the continents spread apart? After the crack, did the continents, pull apart? Or were the continents attached to this giant landmass that is below the Atlantic and or the South and Northern Atlantic Oceans? Well, yeah, I believe that when we, from what I suggested, that, it's possible that they missed, go back to what I was saying about the split that happened and then the water gushing, covering the earth, and then after the flood, the continents just rose, and how, I believe that's what they missed. I believe they missed that part. And what I'm suggesting is that South America, North America, and Africa were all connected to at one time were connected to the earth that was now underneath the ocean. And the only two things that happened was it split, and after the flood, the continents rose, and obvious, because it would have all been connected. I believe that, again, South, like all the continents that we see would have been connected to the land that is beneath the Atlantic Ocean, and they obviously arose, in leaving that. So that's the only thing that I see different. But again, it's like, why do I see that different? Well, I, go back to what I, said about people having the gift of knowledge, being able to just see things that people miss. So that's a good. So if you're somebody that can see things that other people have missed, that's a good indicator that you probably are somebody with the gift of knowledge. So now, here's something, here's a really good example of somebody with the gift of knowledge. So, if you go back to, I don't know how many videos, probably quite a few, maybe 10 videos by now or something like that, and in other videos before, I've always suggested that the people of Middle Earth today are not Middle Earth. Well, that's from the Lord of the Rings. Don't know where I got that from, but the people out of the Middle East they always looked Middle Eastern. So has their skin tone always looked like a tan, like a shade of tan? And, I have always suggested that just because the people in the Middle East that are alive today, just because their skin tone is tan, that doesn't mean that their skin tone, like the people of that their skin tone would have been the same. Like, there's many people that believe that because Abram came from the land of that means, and because is found in the Middle East, they believe that his skin tone would be like the same skin tone of the Middle Easterns that live there today. Well, I've been reading this book here, Traced, and you can see the author. I've been and I've been telling people this even before even before I started reading this book. I was talking about it. I literally was like, there is no way that just because Abram it was from the land and is from the Middle East, that doesn't mean we know his skin tone. And I've been saying that I've been saying that for years. I know, like here on social media, you're somebody that doesn't really know that I've been saying that for years. You only get what I, put on here. But I do have a lot of videos, you know, before I started reading this book, have put out videos saying that it's possible that their skin tone was a different shade. Um, you know, and so therefore we don't really know the skin tone, because a lot of people want to claim that Jesus would have looked Middle Eastern and so on and so forth. Like to they want to argue that his skin tone would have been tan at the very least, because that's the skin tone of the people that live there today. But, I would make claims that they don't really know that, because they don't know the skin tone of the people of um, that lived in the Middle East during that time. And that was all, I made all of these claims before I started reading this book. And then just last night, or sometime last night, I, got to chapter 4. Obviously, I've been busy. You can see I've been busy taking notes. Um, there's multiple um, pages where I've taken notes. I am reading this very carefully. I'm highlighting what I believe is very important, so that way, if I was to pass this along and have somebody else read, they can see the highlighted parts and go, wow, that's so I'm basically not only doing the work for myself, um, by highlighting the important parts of this book, but for anyone else. So, because I do plan on sharing this book to other people. I do have other people in mind that I would love for them to read this book. So, but then going on further, for anyone that I would want to share this book, I just want to, help them, kind of understand what is important. So I've been highlighting, it's safe to say that I've been reading this very slow, because I've been taking notes, I've been highlighting, I've been, thinking about the things that this person is talking about. So reading it very, very slowly. So last night is so that's a reason why I'm only on chapter 4. But last night I got to chapter 4 and I read something very interesting. Very, very interesting. And it'll be something that is confirmation of what I've been telling everybody in, certain videos about. Just because Abram coming from and is in the Middle East, that doesn't mean that his skin tone would have been the same. And I found something in this book that brings confirmation. What is it? I want you to sit for a little bit, though. For all those that say, oh, you just know what skin tone Jesus would have been. You can be mad at me. You can get extremely mad at me. I don't care. You do, like the people that have been claiming that they know Jesus's skin tone. In fact, they're just trying to say that. Why? Because they're looking to get their skin, their people, like, they just want power, is all, to give power to their people. And it would be a certain um, type of people that believe that Jesus was a certain color. And, well, I'm just going to sit and soak this in. All right, that's enough soaking it in. Here's what I found. Does this, so he's, talking, and then he gets to the end of a sentence and he asks this question. The author of this book asks this question: does this mean East Asians have always looked this way? Interesting. So when we think about Asia, especially East Asia, we we can clearly see the way that they look and things like that. This author is asking the question: have they always looked that way? Has people living in Asia always looked the way that they do now? Has ancient um, ancient Egyptians have the ancient Egyptians always looked? Have they always had um, the same skin tone, the same eye color, the same hairstyle? Have they always had you know have they always looked the way that they look today? Well, he, you know, gives us a pretty good answer. So there was a time that he lived in, X state. I'm not going to say where he lived, but if you read this book, it tells you, but I'm not going to give it away. He lived in X state, and he was, there was a time that he talked, to somebody, and they wanted him to guess where. So he often talks about people's heritage and where they're from, and to strangers all the time. And there was one stranger that wanted him to guess where they came from. And so he, based on things that he studied, based on skin tone, eye color, hair, the shape of their face, the shape of their body, things like that. He, you know, his he gave his best estimated guess. Well, guess what? He was wrong. In fact, it turned out that this person, their mother was their mother was let me oh her mother was African American. I wanted to make sure that I was had the right parent. her mother was African American and her father was Pakistani. And I'm not for sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but her mother was from Africa and her father from a different country. So that would explain why she looked a certain way. Right? So that brings me to my next point. So I've also said in a few videos ago that you can take, and again, this was before reading this in this book. I said that you can take somebody with dark skin tone and they marry somebody with a lighter, skin tone, and, like black and white, people with a dark skin tone and, a white skin tone get married, their offspring is going to be somewhere in between. And the confirmation comes from this book. The author of the writer, claims that exactly what and for the most part, that's common knowledge. For the most part, that's common knowledge. We all know that. But these are what I said before reading in this book. And so I said something else before reading this book is I said, now you take that child and they get married to somebody with dark skin, the offspring of that child is, going to kind of go back. Well, I was right, but I was also wrong. So, yes, sometimes somebody with the gift of knowledge will say things, before even knowing it themselves. Because before reading about it, I said it. Before reading about it, I said it. Does that mean that I was 100% correct? No. That doesn't mean that I was 100. But how many things did I get correct? Well, I did get a lot of things. Like, you go back and just look at it. The only thing that I got half wrong was when I said that when the offspring from the, they get married to somebody of dark skin, that is going to go back to, well, I was a little off on that. And I will admit that. Because this author of the book says that only one fourth of their offspring will go back to the dark skin, right? Only 1/4. So, but that's still 1/4. And so, once again, Was I right? You can clearly see that I made that claim before reading this book. And so after reading this book, I find out that, yeah, I mean, there is 1/4 that does go back to being a darker skin tone. So now you have, I mean, the majority. So you have, let's go back to the beginning. Again, you have skin tone black, skin tone white. They get married, have offspring. Their offspring is going to be a skin tone that's somewhere in the middle. They grow up, they get married to somebody that skin tone is black. They have children, and 1/4 of their children are going to be a darker skin tone. 1/4. Well, yeah, 1/4 of their offspring is still going to, now 3/4 of the offspring is going to still be the same, um, you know, but 1/4 of the offspring is going to go back to the original, how dark their um, father or mother was, right? So now you have a people that 1/4 is darker skinned, and another 3/4 would be tan. Interesting. And you can clearly see that now you kind of do have a slight mix. You do have somewhat of a slight mix, or on paper, right? Because I don't really know, but you can, because 1/4 would go, like if you had enough children, I suppose, obviously, but the offspring is pretty much going to be tan. Some might have, like, some of the offspring might be a darker tan than other offspring, but for the most part, what the author is suggesting is that 3/4 of the offspring would be, somewhere in between white and black. So, what I found was confirmation of the things that I said before reading. And that, circling back around to the second point, that's my second point, is you know that you have the gift of knowledge if you're constantly able to see things that other people miss, and then you teach on something that um, you don't really have all the pieces of the puzzle but you can clearly see enough to teach on it, and then later you get confirmation that you were right. So those are the two biggest ways that you can kind of know that you have the gift of knowledge. But so, and that would be the reason why the gift of knowledge is different than knowledge. Like the gift of knowledge, like again, there's a people that have knowledge, that they obtain that knowledge over time through study, through research, through schooling. A person with a gift of knowledge is actually really, really dangerous to who? Satan. Because there is just simply things that somebody with the gift of knowledge sees that other people don't see, and then they get that knowledge from God. So it's almost like they have that knowledge before, like almost before they have so because I had that knowledge with me before obtaining it here in this book, before reading about it. So how dangerous are people who have the gift of knowledge? Like, yeah, very, very dangerous. So now you can kind of see where, you know, Satan really does not want people with the gift of knowledge to be in position to teach or to preach or, you know, things like that, you know. And those that do have the gift of knowledge that jump on social media, they're probably going to have the most trouble. And, you know, it's because the people with the gift of knowledge really do threaten, um, Satan's schemes and his ways, and, you know, threaten his tactics. And because the person with the gift of knowledge can also kind of detect how Satan would be attacking the church and, you know, other things like that. So, that's a lot. And I thank you for those that have made it this far. And I hope to see you in the next video.